Hello guys, and welcome to the start of a new reading blog. So today what I'm going to do is that I'm going to try to tackle some of the top books of 2024 according to Goodreads. So Goodreads puts their annual list of the best books. I already read the best sci-fi books, but now I want to tackle just the best books in general. I think this is a really good time for me to read some nonfiction and read other genres that I usually don't get around during the year. So yeah, I'm not going to read every single book in every single category just because that will be a little overwhelming and I don't want to get myself in a reading slump. So I'm just going to tell you which one's one that I'm not going to read and which ones I'm actually going to read. So for favorite fiction, the Wedding People one, and that one I actually am not going to read even though I think it's gonna be very heartfelt. I just don't think I can get to it. And the next one is The Woman by Christine Hanna. This one won for favorite historical fiction. Again, this one I'm also not gonna read. They go hand by hand. I think they're gonna be very hard hitting, and I'm not in the mental headspace to read very hard hitting fiction right now. And I do want to leave it for later on in the year where I will be able to appreciate it a little bit more. They're just not books that kind of lend themselves to binge them. And then there are a couple of books that I've already read, but I'm going to give you my opinion about. So for favorite mystery thriller, the God in the Woods one, I read this book previously this year. This book is about a camp that it's run, and it's also about a family that lives on the campgrounds. And the family that lives in the campgrounds sent one of their kids to the camp one summer, and they went missing, and nobody knows what happened. And kind of like, where did they go? And now this mystery is happening, I think 15 years later or so, but all this is happening in the 70s. And now they're sending their other kids to the campground as well, and then she goes missing. So we want to just figure out what happened previously and what happened now. It is very thrilling, very atmospheric, extremely well written. I feel like it reads almost more like a regular fiction book, and it doesn't have that has a lot more lyrical writing than your normal mystery thriller does. Then my next one that I already read is Funny Story by Emily Henry. This one is one of Emily Henry's newest books. She always wins this category every year. And this one is about two people that were dating other people, and then they get broken up with, and the two people that broke up with them get together, and now they have nowhere to go, so they decide to live together. And then they start kind of like not fake dating, but just like going on adventures together, because the girl in the relationship kind of like doesn't know what to do with her life. It's kind of like, where am I going? Because she moved to this new location just to be with her ex-boyfriend. So now she's kind of rediscovering herself as well as meeting this new guy and getting to know him. And it's very slow burn, but extremely well written. It has a lot of descriptions of food, which I really like in books. And I felt like the romance was very believable, and then the writing was very beautiful. It made me cry at the end. Emily Henry's books just like have a lot of hard-hitting stuff in between all the fun romance. So I think that's what she does best, and I totally think she deserves to win. So I'm not gonna read the favorite romantasy because it's a Sarah J. Maas book, and it's, I think, the fourth in the series. And I have not read any of the previous books in the series, but I am gonna read the runner-up because I do think that I do want to read a romantasy. I think it's a very fun genre. So I'm gonna read Quicksilver instead. I think this one is pretty, the cover just looks so trashy that I think it's gonna be very fun. If it's gonna be fun like bad or fun good, I don't know yet, but I'm gonna tell you when I read it, and I hope it is fun good, because otherwise I'm gonna be really sad. And then I'm gonna read TJ Klune's new book, Somewhere Beyond the Sea. TJ Klune also always wins this category when he's nominated. Last year's book really disappointed me, so hopefully this year's book will be a lot better. I already read the winner for the favorite science fiction. If you want my full opinion, it's in the previous video before this one. But basically, I hated this book. The Ministry of Time is just a mess science fiction that actually got a lot of people. I think a lot of people that don't usually read science fiction and usually go for more normal fiction or literary fiction really enjoy this book because it was written very well. But as far as a sci-fi plot, I think enough sci-fi characters, I think it was severely lacking. So this book is about the Ministry of Time, which is a project where people are brought. The UK government discover a time machine, but instead of sending people into the future, they bring people from the past into current day, kind of to experiment on them and figure out how time travel affects humans, and whether or not people are gonna be able to travel in the future, and is following this woman that works for the Ministry of Time, and she gets assigned this subject who is a British captain that lived in the 1800s or so. So it is supposed to be like a fish out of water funny story, and also very introspective, and then it has a twist at the end that I could see coming a mile away. Again, everything was very meh. I didn't enjoy this book. I've talked about it like 15 times now, so I'm just gonna stop. But yeah, I don't like it. And then the other book that I'm not gonna get to is the favorite horror, You Like It Darker by Stephen King. I just have never liked Stephen King's books, and I don't think this one's gonna be any different, so I kind of don't want to waste my time. And then the favorite debut novel, so this one won How to End a Love Story, and I am actually gonna read that one, so look forward to my thoughts. The next one is Funny Story by Emily Henry. That one I already read, so that one won Best Audiobook. And for favorite young adult fantasy and sci-fi, Ruthless Vows won. So I'm not gonna read this one because I already read the other book by this author, which is the previous book, Divine Rivals, and I did not like it. So I'm not gonna waste my time reading a sequel of a book that I didn't like. But if you want to see my opinion, I will link the video down below where I talk about Divine Rivals. Then for favorite young adult fiction, it's Heartstopper. So this one is just, again, the fourth book in a series, or like Heartstopper number 5. So instead of reading that one, I'm going to read the runner-up, which is The Reappearance of Rachel Price. I look forward to this one. I think Holly Jackson is a really, really good thriller author, and that this one is gonna be like a ton of fun, hopefully. Okay, and the last two books that I'm gonna read is The Anxious Generation, which won the best nonfiction, and I'm gonna read The Third Gilmore Girl, which won the best memoir, and I'm gonna read the one that won history and biography, which is The Bookshop: A History of American Bookstores. And again, I do this every year to read more nonfiction. I think that's my weakest genre, so I want to read the best of the best every year. I feel like for other genres, I can kind of like read everything, but for nonfiction, I really need it to be more curated than that. So I'm looking forward to reading all this nonfiction and a couple thrillers and one romance. I think 1 or 2 romances in the mix. So yeah, let's just get into the video. Hello everybody and welcome to my blog. So today I finished one book and I wanted to talk to you about it. So I finished the first book in my Goodreads top 10, and it is, I already forgot, The Third Gilmore Girls. So this book is by Kelly Bishop, and it's about her story. She had a long career before she was on Gilmore Girls, so it was a lot about her doing theater, her growing up in the ballet, being in like New York when it was like the 60s and the 50s, and how excited it all was, and then like a lot of her life after Gilmore Girls, because Gilmore Girls has been out of, like, for like 20 years, it hasn't been on air. Well, not that many, but like a long time. And now she went through a lot of grief, a lot of people in her life passed away, and it was just incredibly poignant, and I think it was very interesting to have a biography of a person that you kind of feel like you know, but then you just get to know them so much better by having this biography. I especially loved all the things about theater, because I am a very big musical fan, but I was not I didn't even know she was in Chorus Line. I didn't know her at all from that show. I've heard a lot of songs from Chorus Line, mainly from Glee, but I've never heard the soundtrack, so I had a lot of fun listening to the soundtrack today, even though I wouldn't necessarily recommend that, because I feel like that's a soundtrack that you more want to like see, because it has a lot of dancing rather than listen to. But either way, it was an absolutely fabulous book. I had so much fun with it. And then the second book that I'm in the middle of is called The Bookshops, and that one won for the category of nonfiction. And this one is just kind of like a lot of short stories, kind of connected but not really in loosely chronological order about like bookshops. Kind of takes you from the very first American bookshop that was established by Franklin all the way through like gay bookshops in the 1960s, and then you probably end up, I haven't finished it, but I will imagine you end up in like the modern day Barnes and Nobles and independent bookshops and like booktube, and kind of like wraps up in our modern day life. I find them very fascinating, even though I'm not loving how the stories are told. I think that we jump from one story to another too quickly, and it might be a problem because I'm listening to the audiobook rather than reading the physical book. I feel like if I was reading the physical book, maybe I will be able to take a little bit more time in between stories to digest. But it's just kind of like jumping from story to story, kind of like not really recapping or reminiscing all that much, but it's kind of leaving a lot to interpretation, which I also think is nice. And yeah, so my favorite so far is I got to learn a lot about like in the American Revolution, how a lot of the bookshops were very imperative. I love to learn about the whole like a what's it called, bookshop row in New York, and how important New York publishing has been, and a lot of the gay bookstores that opened, and a lot of caravans that were bookstores, and it was just a lot of very interesting banned books kind of stories. And I feel like if you know a lot about bookstores already, this might be boring, but since I don't have a background in history almost at all, like I went to school in the United States in college, but I didn't before that, so a lot of American history kind of eludes me. So I found a lot of that very interesting, kind of like in a context that I already understand better because it's surrounding bookstores. So I'm learning a lot about American history through the bookstores, and just I find that to be a very good way for me to learn. And yeah, I'm enjoying it. I'm not like loving it. Again, I'm not super engaged. Yesterday with the Kelly Bishop book, I finished it in an entire day, and I couldn't like wait to listen to more of the story. I gave it 4 stars because of it, because I found it fascinating. This one is because it's like a little bit too short story like, a little too disconnected, a little too impersonal. I am not getting quite those feels of being like super immersed in a book, but it's still like kind of like reading a textbook, you know, like you're engaged, you're interested, but you're not necessarily like immersed, and you're kept at a distance. So that's my feeling of the book so far. And yeah, I'll tell you when I finish it, and I'll keep chugging at them. Bye. So my life is a little messy right now. My hair is a mess. My room is a mess. I am packing to go to Guatemala tomorrow, so everything is on the floor right now. But I did want to talk to you about finishing a book while I was packing, because I just finished the reappearance of Rachel Price. This one won the Young Adult Goodreads Choice Award for Contemporary, or maybe for Mystery Thriller. I don't know. It won, like, I think it was just for young adult books. And I was a little nervous because it's been a while since I read a young adult book, and I actually really, really, really enjoyed it. It had a lot of twists. It had one of those main characters that is a little bit annoying, but let's back up. So this book is about a young character. Her name is Belle, and she just turned 18 when her dad agrees to film a documentary about her mom that disappeared when she was just 2 years old. And this is a big like true crime mystery. Nobody knows what happened to her mom. She was in the car when it happened, so she's also a big part of the mystery. And now they're filming a documentary about it, and it's kind of like part documentary, but it's mostly not. The documentary doesn't have a lot to do with it, and it's not like really mixed media. So kind of like that's just kind of like the backdrop of everything and why things start to come to light. And when the documentary is happening, her mom reappears, and the whole vibe is very sketchy. Her mom is clearly hiding something, but she can't really figure out what. Her dad is acting super weird, and everybody seems to be keeping something to themselves. So she immediately, with the help of one of the guys from the documentary film crew, go in to try to solve what is going on. And it is very young adult, like in some of the dialogue, but then the twists were very well made. They were well crafted. There were breadcrumbs all throughout. And the only reason that I didn't love it, because it was almost a 5-star, I feel like if I pushed like the end and it was very satisfying ending, I would have given it a 5-star, but I'm only gonna give it a 3 or 4 star because the ending pissed me off. Not because it wasn't good, it's because I personally like when mystery books kind of like, if there's a lot of lies that made the mystery happen, all those lies come to light, and like kind of like the public also gets to know the truth. And in this one, all the lies just got buried by more lies at the end, and I was like, how can you not see that this is not the solution to your problem? You cannot solve a problem caused by a bunch of lies with a bunch more lies. You're just gonna keep affecting the people in your life, and you're gonna make the problem worse long term. And that's the main reason I didn't love this book, is because I could not see it, the ending kind of ending well for anybody. It kind of like tried to wrap it up and be like, okay, nobody will have seriously emotional damage that will screw up their entire lives because of this. And I'm like, no, like they're all like seriously still like messed up in the head, and we cannot just tie it up in a bowl because you said that they were gonna be fine and lied to everybody. These are teenagers that are gonna be seriously screwed up. So that is my only complaint. I think like the author tried to like tell us that everybody was gonna be fine, when I know, and I feel like everybody knows, that they're not gonna be fine. And yeah, so, and I also wanted to tell you about the other book that I finished, which was The Bookstores. So that was the nonfiction that I was reading earlier, and I actually finished it. My opinion didn't really change. I still think that it's a little too impersonal and a little bit too fast-paced. And I kind of like thought more about it after I finished it, trying to figure out why I felt so disconnected from it. And I think it's mostly because, oh, the light just went off. I think it's mostly because the stories didn't have a lot of time to digest the story in between them. So usually you have an author that will tell you like a story about like a specific history of a bookstore, and then he'll give you a little bit of opinion, and then he'll kind of like leave it a little open-minded or give other feedback and other people's opinions. But this one was just kind of like a bunch of history and history and history and history and history, not very opinions, or not tying it together in any way. So I think that's why I felt disconnected, because I didn't feel like there was maybe a lesson all throughout. Not that nonfictions have to have a lesson, sometimes just like having the history is interesting, but I just didn't feel like it was really pulling anything out of me or making me think very critically at all, which is fine. I do enjoy. I feel like if I read this like I read a story or like a chapter, because the chapters are almost like stories, every night for like a month, I would have really enjoyed that. And the other thing that kind of bothered me was that it was a little too United States centric. Like it was all about US bookstores. They very rarely touched on England. A little, just kind of like how things came from England, but it was more like to connect that back to America. And I feel like, or like the US generally, because they didn't even talk about Canada or Latin America at all. So yeah, it's just like, I feel like it could have expanded a little bit more, but again, like bookstores is such like a big topic that I feel like if it didn't have that focus, it might have been like too much information. So yeah, didn't hate that book, didn't love it. I don't think I'm gonna reread it or buy it for my collection. It was like a solid 3 to 4 stars because it was well written and didn't do anything atrocious. So yeah, I am all packed up. Like if you see, well, I'm not all packed up. I'm like so far not packed up at all. I have like my suitcase full of my Christmas gifts. Oh, I don't think I introduced you to Mr. Goose here. His name is Maverick Patricia Goose. And he sits in this corner for now because if I put it outside, I'm afraid somebody's going to steal it, because right now it's really cute and it's not weighed down. So I feel like I'm going to weigh it down and then I'm going to put it outside. And this is my luggage with all my clothes. And this is the room right now in its current stage. It's a mess. So I am going to finish packing. I do want to get my nails done. Ooh, the Zoom is still on. Okay. I do want to go get my nails done, and then I have to go to Target to get a couple last minute things, and then I should be all done for the day. And I can keep reading. I think what I'm going to pick up next, I don't know. I think I might pick up either the one that won for the other nonfiction book, The Anxious Generation maybe, but I'll let you know when I pick it up. Bye.
Sound stress.
Ahora sí estás grabando.
Bienvenidos a nuestro vlog.
I got my family drunk part 3. Andy, decí hola.
Soundstripe.
Estoy grabando el vlog de Amanda.
Ya no hay pelote, solo aquí.
No. Muy bien. Soundstripe.
Hola. Saluden a la cámara. Amanda, saluden. Oh no, I cannot catch. Hello.
Qué loco.
Bueno.
Hello everybody and welcome back. So today I just came back from my vacation. I was about for 2 weeks. I went back to Guatemala. That's where I am originally from, so I got to see my family and my friends. It was a ton of fun. I went to the beach. I'm sure I put some footage in here, and right now I wanted to talk about what I read while I was down there. I didn't vlog when I was down there, like actually like physically like talk to the camera, because I kind of like, I'm still a little ashamed to talk to the camera in front of my family, to be honest. In my house where I stay, like basically I'll show some clips, but there's no walls. There's no walls, so people can hear me talk, and I just can't handle it, so I'm sorry about that. But I read 2 books while I was down there. That is by far the least amount of books, and I know that's crazy because it was only 2 weeks. But usually when I go down there, because I have no phone signal, I can read a ton. And because there's some really long car rides and the flight there, I usually read in the airport and during transportation. So I usually get at least 3 books read. But just got 2 books read, which is totally fine. One of the books that I read was like a massive chunker, and I loved it. I devoured it. I thought it was really good to be like not a palate cleanser because it ended up being super intense. But let me talk to you more about Quicksilver. So this one is the chunky one that I read. I started it honestly because it was one of the runner-ups. It didn't win the Goodreads Choice Award, but the one that actually won, it was a Sarah J. Maas book, and it was like the bajillions in a series, so I was not going to read that. So I chose the one that was the most appealing to me, that was in the top 5, and it was Quicksilver. And the reason I chose it was because first, I thought it was shorter. It is not short. And second, because it looked bad. Like the cover, it just looks bad to me. It looks like bad Wattpad fanfic. It looks like somebody grabbed like a stock image and put some like butterfly stickers on it, and I was like, whoa, this book is gonna be terrible. Let me read it, because sometimes I like a terrible book. I'm not gonna lie, I do like reading something bad just for the fun of it. Like watching a bad movie can be fun sometimes. So I started reading it, and I was so pleasantly surprised. Maybe because my expectations were like so low. I was expecting like basically no world building smut, and it actually had a tremendous amount of world building. It had a lot of very interesting characters. It was more of an ensemble cast that I originally thought, and all the people in the ensemble cast ended up being really interesting, as well as the plot and the tension and the drama of it all was really good. The magic system was really good as well. So this is about a girl who is in this desert planet, and she's very depressed because she's like trying to fight for her life every day. She doesn't have water, she doesn't have food, she lives like basically homeless. She sleeps in the top of attics with her brother. One day she steals this gauntlet that is one of the most it's just like she thought that she could steal it, but she couldn't, and she can't get away with it. So she gets trapped and taken to the queen. This is a queen that has been living for many, many centuries. Everybody else is mortal in this world, and nobody knows why she lives for so long, but she has been managed to living for so long, and she's mad basically, and because of that, she executes her immediately. And she's about to die when a portal opens and she goes into another dimension. And honestly, at first I was like, this is so weird, like what does a portal open? But every single world that we were in was like so immersed and so well designed. Like when she was in the desert planet, I could feel her thirst, and it was like, oh my god, so heavy. And then when you went to the Fey realm, because that's where she ends up, you're like, oh my god, it's so beautiful, it's so majestic, but again it's so dark still, because it's like Fays can be brutal, and it's kind of like that type of Fae story where they're very beautiful, they live forever, not forever, they live very long lives, but they're terrible to each other, and they're very brutal with each other. But they have very intricate society that you get to know a little better. And at first I was a little frustrated because this book was not giving me all the information I wanted all at once. But it was very good at strategically giving you a certain amount of information throughout the chapters. And you were learning with the character. And it wasn't that thing where the character is being dumb and not asking enough questions. She really had a lot going on, so she couldn't even like get to know the questions. So I thought it was incredibly well made that way. And the romance was the only thing that I didn't quite see. And as a person that loves a fated mate story, I just I thought it was a little cheesy. I think it would have been really helpful if I got the male's POV in this scenario, because I think it would have been a little less daunting when he finally confessed his love, because he went from being like asshole to like the most simp character ever, and I was like, whoa, this is a little bit of a shock to the system. I was like, where is this coming from in a lot of ways? But again, it was like, if you're just into guys turning out to be simps for a girl, you're gonna love it, because he was super hot, honestly. And the sex scenes, like, there are 3 smut scenes in this book. I'm not gonna lie, I was more into the plot. And I know that's kind of like weird to say, but I just kind of like was, when they came, I was like kind of like wanting to know more about like the magic system, and I knew that there was gonna be big reveals after them, so I kind of like skimmed them a little till get to like the magic system reveals, rather than enjoy the smut, which is super unusual for me. Usually that's my favorite part of books, but not this time. And again, it was weird that for a romantasy book, the weakest part was romance and the strongest part was a fantasy, or I feel like in a lot of the books I've been reading recently, it's complete opposite. But I loved it. I'm gonna pick up the next one. I think it ended up with a very satisfying ending, but still enough cliffhanger to keep me going in the series. And it reminded me a lot of like books like Lord of the Rings, even though obviously the writing is nowhere near on par to that book, but it's just like the plot and the world is very exciting. I was totally cinematic, and the plot was very well done. I don't know. Trashy fairy book for the win, I guess. The next book that I read is How to End a Love Story. This is one for the best debut novel. It is by Yulin Huang, and I absolutely thought it deserved the best debut novel. I think this author could go the way of Emily Henry, writing very like a woman's fiction type stories through the lens of romance. I thought it was very deep. It hit a lot of emotional like strong points. It dealt with a lot of grief and the mother-daughter relationship. So if the summary of this book is that the main character is a woman who's an author. She's wrote a very popular YA series that's now being auctioned in order to become a TV show for like a streaming service. And in a way, she meets this guy, and he is gonna be like the creative director for the TV show she's gonna be working on now that her book is gonna be turned into the TV show. But they actually have a very sordid, sad history, because when they were both teenagers, the main character's sister committed suicide, and she did it by jumping in front of the car. And the guy who was driving the car was actually this guy who's now the creative director for her TV show. So obviously she has a lot of emotional turmoil because this is the first time they've been seeing each other for the past like 20 or so years. Like, she obviously is already like a fish out of water because it's the first time she's been in Hollywood, and she kind of like tries to get him to quit a lot at the beginning, and then she kind of like gives up on it. I never understood why he didn't quit. I feel like it would have been easy for him to quit, and he didn't really have a strong reason why not, in my opinion. They kind of try to justify it in the book, but I never quite got the justification to be fair. And then they obviously start falling in love through the process of writing this TV show. And it becomes a love story, but then she also has to grapple with the idea of her parents. Obviously, they wouldn't like him, and they are also not very warm people, and she goes through a lot of like emotional things that happen throughout the book where she needs her parents, and she has to confront them a lot, and they are very unemotional. And even to the end of this book, they kind of still don't accept her, and I think that was one of the stronger pieces of this book. Is kind of like the relationship of estranged parents with their daughters in their 20s, where they can't really control you anymore, but you kind of like don't give them information, and they get very frustrated, so they start intruding more in your life. So, and then you get frustrated because they're intruding, so you start like becoming more inside yourself. So it was that interesting dynamic that you saw throughout this book, as well as the interesting dynamic of will they, won't they, because obviously once they start having feelings for each other, she obviously thinks that she shouldn't be in a relationship with him because of the memory of her sister. She doesn't think that her family will ever accept him, blah 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 blah. In summary, it's a good book. It was just not for me. I didn't enjoy it even a little bit. Like, while reading it, I was bored, and or not bored. I knew why this book was good. I just knew that this book wasn't for me, and it wasn't a book that I would necessarily enjoy. I thought the characters were snooty and bratty and like kind of like, people that are authors and they kind of like have strong personalities and are kind of like very into themselves. They were both characters that were like that, and I just didn't connect with them a lot. But it was not a bad book. I just didn't enjoy it for myself, but I definitely see the merit in this author's writing and how she develops characters. So I imagine that she'll have like a lot of success in the future. So I absolutely think she deserves winning the award for Best New Author. I just didn't like the book, but that's a me problem. I tend to go for more like funny romances, more rom-com type romances, rather than this like heart-hitting romances. Have never been my thing. I don't think they'll ever be my thing, to be honest. I keep trying new ones and I keep having the similar results, but I will keep trying. Maybe one day, maybe Abby Jimenez will be my sappy romance author. I think I'm gonna try her next year. So yeah, those are the 2 books that I read while I was down in Guatemala. I have a couple more to go. I think I have 3 more to go. I am back at work tomorrow, and I've been cleaning like a crazy person over the last weekend, because I came back on Friday. I've just been cleaning like a crazy person since then. And yeah, I hope I can read during work if it's not too crazy when I come back, and I'll update you when I have an update. Bye. Hello everybody, and welcome to the reading update. So I've read some. So the first book that I'm almost done with is The Anxious Generation. So this one won the award for the best, I want to say nonfiction, but it's probably not true. And it's been really good so far. I think it's very interesting because it talks about the anxious generation, which is Gen Z. It's people that grew up with iPhones when they were in high school and early middle school. And it's talking to people that was born from 1995 to 2010, I believe is the cutoff. And I was very much born in that generation. I was born in 1997. But I remember not having an iPhone and then being like a preteen and getting an iPhone and getting addicted to like social media. And for me, it happened quite slowly. But now that I'm an adult, it's like full blown a little bit of an addiction. I definitely feel like my YouTube Instagram consumption is too much, and when I get into watching Netflix on my phone, it can also be a lot. So it made me realize a lot of those things, and it's kind of talking about it like he's not talking to Gen Z, like he's talking to parents of future generations. So I find that very interesting because I can get it in both sides, both as a future parent because I want to be a parent one day, not anytime soon, but like one day, and then as a person that also got affected by days as a Gen Z person that's an older Gen Z, because now I have to like rewire my brain, and then I also don't want to do this to my child, so I have to figure out how I'm gonna grow in a society that puts so much pressure on everybody to have a social media presence. Obviously we're here, and then it also puts a lot of pressure on posting and being perfect all the time, and then you get comparisons to a lot of people and you're constantly comparing yourself. The reason that I found the most impactful is when he was talking about people's shortened attention spans and all the people that are multitasking constantly so they don't pay attention to one thing at one time, and people that can no longer have alone time with themselves because they always have to be doing something on their phone. And I very much fall in that category. I don't get affected by social media negatively in the way that I'm constantly comparing to myself to other people, but I definitely do get affected by social media by the fact that I can't concentrate like I used to. And I feel like my brain is always at 80% because I'm always having like a 20% that's like just doing social media or looking things on my phone or thinking about things that I saw on my phone, and I don't have time just for myself and alone with my thoughts. And it's making me incredibly anxious because I'm already an anxious person to begin with, but I think the constant feedback loop of like just being able to scroll and scroll and scroll and scroll and like changing and going from wildfires, which right now are happening in LA and is horrible, and then going to a happy cat video and then to a shocking, disgusting like acne video, and it's just like everything all at once all the time. And it made me realize for sure that I am being affected negatively by this. And I thought all this time that I wasn't being affected negatively by this, even because again I wasn't comparing myself to others and I didn't have that negative effect. But it made me realize that the anxious generation, and it talks about it in chapters, it's divided in chapters. It goes from like how it all began and how women were affected, how men are affected, how people of certain ages get affected, and then how the different effects that has as like isolating people and people no longer having physical connection, just online connections. It goes through what I experience the most, which is the constant non-attention of anything anymore. And then it goes through comparison, and then it goes to like violent rhetoric being expanded everywhere. So it goes through a lot of that thing. And it's an incredibly poignant book. I definitely think that if you're a Gen Z like myself, or if you're a future parent, or if you are a parent of a young person, you can benefit from this book. My only comment so far is that I think it's getting a little repetitive. I'm not done with the book. I'm like probably like 80% in. And that's kind of like, again, it might be a syndrome of my shortened attention span. Because of the stupid TikTok apps, I'm just used to getting all my information in a very condensed form. So now that he's just going on and on, I'm like, well, why are you still talking about this? But now that the book is obviously making me think, is that a problem? Is him making his point over and over again an actual problem, or is it just because my brain is so used to go? So, and then the other thing that I have a problem with is that I don't think the author realized that Gen Z were gonna be reading this book. I think he thought he had older millennials, boomers, and Gen X in mind when he wrote this book, which is probably his generation. So in a lot of ways it can sound a little condescending because he's talking about Gen Z like they're not there, or they're not listening, or they're not part of the conversation yet. And a lot of Gen Zs are sentient, human, fully grown people with jobs and careers. So I think he could have used a little bit more of that lens in that book. But again, I think it's incredibly powerful, and I already started implementing some changes in my life. I immediately went to my screen time and place some restrictions on some apps because I don't want to live like this anymore. But it's going to be extremely hard because I already feel the constant not being engaged with something else really affecting me. And then also I implemented this thing where he also talked about like people who wear headphones constantly and always put something in their headphones, whereas music or whereas it's like an audiobook or something, they're actually just not giving the attention that their surroundings deserve, and they're missing a lot of things, a lot of micro connections, a lot of opportunities from connections with others, because they're constantly like isolating themselves. And I am a person that is wearing headphones, even though I'm not sometimes not listening to anything. I just like having them on because I hate when my phone sounds out loud. I would say 90% of the time. It's really unhealthy. So I decided to put a band on headphones while I am in my house so I can connect better with my husband. Because it's usually a problem. I think most of the time I'm like looking at something else on my phone while he's looking at something else on his computer. It's not good for connection. So that's something I'm going to do this year. I'm obviously going to talk more about it in my goals because I still haven't done that video, but it is incredibly important how this book already is starting to change my life. I don't think I'm going to give it 5 stars. Not that it matters. I just don't think it's 5-star worthy. And I don't know. And it's not moving. That's the thing. But it is very interesting and very, very... It will affect my life for a very long time. And I think when I have children, I'll probably reread it to make sure that I implement what he said about technology being introduced to children. But again, it's not moving, so I'm like, but whatever. But it doesn't matter how many stars I give it. It matters how it affects my life. So, and then the other thing that I was reading, but I DNF'd, is Ruthless Vows. This one is the one that won for YA Fantasy. And I decided that I don't like this book. I didn't like Divine Rivals. I think I gave it 3 stars. I basically read it because it was one of the most hyped books that year as well. And I thought it was good. I thought the world building was meh. And I thought it was a very young adult romance. And like the romance felt like they were pining and very insta love. And it didn't feel disturbed when they got married. So and now in the second book, I think it's just more of the same. I read about 20% of the book. I don't remember exactly how many pages. And I just wasn't connecting with it. And also it was a library hold and I had to give it back. So I was like, you know what? I'm just going to DNF it for now. I didn't like the first one. I'm not enjoying the second one. I think it's for somebody. It definitely has an audience. It's written very beautifully. The world building, although very thin, it is still interesting. And the romance, if you like pining, very much like long stares and very much like they're away from each other, so they're like pining from each other, and it's very wartime, very romantic, very grand, but not a lot of conversation and one-on-one and like connection. You probably will like this book. It's not for me. And again, after reading The Anxious Generation, I was like, cut all things that don't matter to me right now. So it might have radicalized me a little bit for now, but definitely it's not my book, and I just didn't want to keep reading it. So I think the last book that I'm gonna read for this vlog is gonna be TJ Klune's new book. And with that, I think I'm gonna be able to hit all my book goals. And yeah, I'll tell you when I finish The Anxious Generation, and hopefully the new TJ Klune book is better than his last one, because his last one, Something Puppets, was the worst book I read last year. Hello everybody, and welcome to the end of this reading vlog. So today I actually finished my last book that I'm gonna read for this reading vlog, which is Somewhere Beyond the Sea by TJ Klune. So I've heard a lot of mixed things about this book. A lot of people told me, or like a lot of YouTubers that I follow, thought that it was a lot the same thing that the previous book was, The House in the Cerulean Sea, and that it was not really meriting a sequel. And while I agree that it wasn't necessarily meriting a sequel, the first book ended up like pretty nice and pretty like tied up, I do appreciate the sequel, and I do understand why TJ Klune thought it was gonna be good, because obviously you're still following these kids and you also get some new characters, as well as the conflict doesn't get resolved, because the conflict of the first book is about this group of kids that are in an orphanage, and the orphanage is run by this adult magical creature who is a phoenix, and he kind of like gets a lot of scrutiny because he's the only magical person in charge of other magical persons, and in this whole society magical people are very, very excruciatingly like discriminated against. They're very, very treated very badly by society. It's especially these orphanages are run very badly. A lot of abuse happens, and a lot of abuse is currently happening inside these orphanages. So in the first book, you're dealing with like the inspector coming into the orphanage and trying to dismantle it from the inside, but then falling in love with the kids and the main headmaster. They actually fall in love, and then in the second book, you actually get to see them together, which I always find very satisfying. As well as they also try to dismantle the whole association that is being very discriminatory against magical creatures, so you get a lot of that storyline as well, because I think it's important, especially because this book is dealing a lot with discrimination, and a lot of people might think it's very heavy-handed, and I do agree that it is very dumbed down and a little heavy-handed, but sometimes something like very deep stuff like that, you kind of have to drill in people's heads over and over again. It's not right to treat people like that. It's not right to discriminate. This is what the harm is causing. This is how you're supposed to act. And it's heavy-handed, yes, but at the same time, in this like times, I think a lot of people actually do need that heavy-handedness. And I think sometimes reiterating your point in and expanding upon it can be extremely helpful, and I think that is what this book did, and it still had a ton of emotional and very, very deep points, and you got to see a lot of the characters that were in the previous book but weren't as explored. You got to, or were explored, but they were very much the rock of the family. You got to see them break down and have their own issues, which I think is important because a lot of characters that are idealized actually have their own issues. So you got to see a lot of that and a lot of them trying to navigate this new world as well. So I absolutely loved it. I gave it 4.5 stars, almost a 5-star. It made me cry. It kept me really, really engaged the entire time. I couldn't put it down. And yeah, I love this book. And TJ Klune completely outdid himself, because In the Lives of Puppets was very bad, and I don't understand what happened there, but I hope he continues in this trajectory of being able to make very heartfelt stories, very approachable, and still very cozy, even though you're getting a lot of difficult topics dealing with. So yeah, those were all the books that I read. I hope you enjoyed this reading vlog, and I will continue to make videos trying to read the rest of the ones that I didn't cover in this reading vlog in the next year or so. So yeah, comment down below which one was your favorite one that you read this year, and I will get to it if I can.